we are looking at basically what animals categories they have high inflammation. An average population, the average inflammation of the population is higher compared to other animal categories, and try to selectively target that population of animals and do preventative or prophylactic anti-inflammatory management in those animals. And that has shown positive effect, and we are working a number of manuscripts. Well, hoping to have those out by the end of the year, where we select these what I like to call high priority cow groups based on their physiology, inflammation-wise, during the transition period. And we have seen that this population of animals consistently, in all the studies that we have done, they have high inflammation.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. I'm your host, Gail Carpenter. I'm the State Dairy Extension Specialist at Iowa State University. I'm joined today, I should have double-checked how to pronounce your name before we started recording, but by Dr. Adrian Barragan. Am I saying that right?
That's really good, yeah. Good pronunciation.
Do you mind if I call you Adrian today?
No, please do so.
All right. We're joined today by Adrian Barragan, who is a clinical assistant professor at Penn State University. So, Adrian, what I normally do is stalk somebody's LinkedIn page beforehand, get a little bit of background on them, and then ask you questions. But your LinkedIn is pretty bare. I'm not too.
Yeah. No, well, usually I usually have all my information in the website of the university. LinkedIn is something that I had out there, but I really haven't had time to actually, spend the time updating that currently. And actually, I was promoted a couple months ago, so now I'm an associate research professor. So even that is not accurate. So.
Okay, well, congratulations on the promotion and the new job title.
Thank you.
When your goal is to help animals reach their full potential, health matters. Diamond V offers a fresh perspective on animal health, a perspective that supports gut health, strengthens immunity, and ultimately enhances performance. For those who choose to invest in keeping healthy animals healthy, feeding Diamond V makes a statement about another dimension of profit, where margins are measured by confidence in your future. To get a fresh perspective, visit diamondv.com. Because animal health deserves a healthier approach.
So do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? What brought you to Penn State?
Yeah, definitely. Well, as many of you may know already, because I work with quite a few of you, I definitely talk with Barry, Dr. Bradford, many of the research that we do linked, they're really similar. Even your study, Gail, on, anti-inflammatory management, those are sort of the lanes that we work. But anyhow, I'm not from around, that is where the strong accent came from. I'm originally from Argentina. My native language is Spanish, so hablo español muy bien. I went to vet school there. I was about 6 years and a half of DVM degree study. I finished my studies in 2010. After I graduated, I practiced in beef cattle operations. So I was the main veterinarian for a 13,000 head operation and a 16,000 head, two different feedlots. And myself and a colleague, they were the two veterinarians in charge of that. And I did that work for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And after that, an opportunity came, which I couldn't let pass. There was a former professor of mine from the college, University of La Plata College of Veterinary Medicine. He was doing a research study in Colorado State. In a large organic farm, 5,000 milking cows back then. Now they definitely expand quite a bit. In collaboration with Professor Dr. Gustavo Schunemann, many of you might know, from the Ohio State University. So anyhow, the opportunity came along. They need an extra vet to help with the field data collection and actually treatment, administration, and sample collection and so on. So I came to the States back in 2012. I did an internship of it was a full year, it was 12 months. And after that, Dr. Schuneman offered me a graduate student position. So I moved from Colorado to Ohio State University. And I did the master. And as you know, after the master comes the PhD. So I did master and PhD at Ohio State University. And back in 2017, I finished my PhD program in July. In July, and in August, I started up here in Pennsylvania. In my current position as back then was assistant clinical professor, and now it was modified. Well, the promotion associate, but now I'm more in the research professor area.
All right, very good. So I guess that's a good transition to what have you been working on?
So the main research that we do in the lab is related to the management. Now I used to call it management. Now I like to call it more modulation of this new really hot topic that you may say this last 10 years or so, the systemic inflammation, right? And how can we modulate that inflammation in a specific group of animals to help those animals to go better with different challenges or physiological challenges during transition period. So I started this line of research back with my PhD, where we did like really similar studies to yours, Gail and Dr. Bradford, where we actually did a treatment approach postpartum. In our case, we use acetyl salicylic acid, similar to the salicylates that you guys have used. But she's trying to find more applied practices, right? At the beginning, back in my PhD, we really focused on, okay, let's follow the pharmacodynamics of the salicylate and make sure that we have constant, the concentration is always about the therapeutic threshold. And then, we went back and said, wait a minute, there's no producer in Earth that's going to be able to apply this, right? Too labor intensive, too much, work involved, and even with the timing. So when I started my position here at Penn State, I said, okay, let's try to come up with something that we still have positive effects, but is actually usable for the industry, right? And that's when we came out with this research study that we published back in 2020. There was 3 papers that went out there, where we actually did 2 doses. One within the first 12 hours after calving, and another one 24 hours later. So 2 treatments, not really. We do the AM/PM sort of treatment approach. So it was really applicable for the producer, and we obtained really similar results. So with that being said, sort of the research has evolved now into more of what animals actually need this treatment, right? In the past, even your research, Gail, we used to say, okay, let's do a blanket therapy treatment, right? Let's treat all the animals, right? And now, even in our studies, we're seeing that some animals actually they're negatively affected by this treatment. They don't need it, right? So how can we identify those animals that need a treatment and treat those animals, but do not, give the other animals what they don't need on top of the extra stress from restraining the animals and the handling and yada yada, all the extra labor, right?
Well, I think I play devil's advocate with myself sometimes on this because, like you said, like we kind of did some pretty similar. Barry and I did some pretty similar work when I was working on my PhD there, and it's So I think, when I was younger and more optimistic about about things, we kind of saw this as you're going to give a blanket treatment to animals. You're going to, every fresh cow get a meloxicam or sodium salicylate, acetyl salicylate, whatever it happened, whatever anti-inflammatory that we're studying. And I think, so that was 2015 is when I finished my PhD. And even in the past 8 years or so, I think we've really seen a shift in transition cow management where it's a lot more hands-off, right? And so I think we're starting to see a shift onto where we're decreasing the number of touches that cows get, right? And wondering if we're actually going to cause more problems in the long run the more we handle these cows. And like you said, like some of these cows actually have a negative effect, and we're adding additional stress on them by doing these extra treatments. And so that really, I think, my perspective on that has kind of shifted a bit also over the past few years about, well, maybe it's not going to be this all of a sudden we've cured it, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are your theories? What do you think we need to be looking for in the cows that are going to be our problem cows?
Yeah, and that is a good question, and ideally what we need is we need a cow side test that like the one that we had, the VHP, right? So we need something that allow us to identify high inflammation in the cows. But my lab, I will say our lab because it's a lot of people collaborating. We are looking at basically what animals categories they have high inflammation, an average population, the average inflammation of the population is higher compared to other animal categories, and try to selectively target that population of animals and do preventative or prophylactic anti-inflammatory management in those animals. And that it has shown positive effect, and we are working a number of manuscripts. We're hoping to have those out by the end of the year, where we select these what I like to call high priority cow groups based on their physiology, inflammation-wise, during the transition period. And we have seen that this population of animals consistently, in all the studies that we have done, they have high inflammation. And those are going to be our primiparous cows, which are heifers before calving, right? Heifers, primipars, or nulliparous, primiparous cows after calving. Overconditioned cows. Now we have some really nice data where we measure inflammation pre-part in those animals, and the animals that have more than 3.75, equal or more than 375 points of body condition score, they have a high inflammation compared to the animals that are in the optimal, which is 275 to 3.5. And then the other thing that we have seen high inflammation have seen is in animals that have dystotic calving, right? And those categories work really fairly good for the postpartum approaches. But one new line of research that we are investigating now, and we were lucky enough to be funded by a large award from NIFA a couple of years ago, where we are investigating the pre-partum anti-inflammatory treatment on these high priority cow groups. And we definitely seen really interesting associations, I'll put it that way, with these categories where the treatment benefits overconditioned animals or nulliparous animals, but in some cases have negative effect in some outcome variables. Give one example, milk production, for instance. Animals, multiparous animals, for instance, they have a negative effect when we treat them pre-partum. So yeah, it's still a lot of information, or excuse me, a lot of what I want to say, a lot of things that we still need to uncover and look for these intricate associations, because the other factors we want to make sure there's not a confounding effect by is one thing that we have seen in the farms that we do study, that and it's sort of a nation wide trend is that primiparous cows are usually overconditioned, right? No matter what farm you go, you're going to have a high percentage of those primiparous cows being overconditioned, right? So now, trying to remove the noise and single out each category is something that we're trying to get better at and having more meaningful results on those. But really interesting association. We presented some of those in the ADSA meeting this year. But yeah, so now is that and we are sort of going a step ahead, or I don't know if it's a step ahead, but trying to find more applicability or higher implementation of this approach. And one thing that we want to look is there any farm records that we can look at that I will know that an animal that has this, for instance, high somatic cell counts at dry off, right? Would that animal have high inflammation? An animal have lower. Would an animal that is lame during the dry period will have high inflammation? An animal that do not. So now we're starting to look at what are the records that the producer regularly collect that could be associated with high inflammation, right? And I think that, when you think about the applicability and the usefulness or utilization of these type of approaches for the industry is when it might have more meaningfulness on that, when we actually can tell, okay, these are the animals that need it, this animal does not, right?
I'm glad you brought up farm records, because that kind of leads into another question that I had for you. As you're identifying these high risk cows that may need the intervention, I'm thinking of, you go out to do your fresh cow checks or your chore, like you're printing off a chore list off PC-Dart or Dairy Comp or whatever your software happens to be, and those are, based on milk deviation or days of milk or whatever it happens to be that you have set up. But, most producers aren't recording body condition score, at least not in their software, right? And I know, I'm sure you're familiar with all of the logistical challenges that come with farm records and looking at different, from one farm to the next, and from one person entering data to the next, how much variation there can be. And so, where do you envision this going? So we're doing this research to kind of identify, yes, these are the cows that need the intervention, but ultimately, what's that going to look like on the producer side, on the practical applied side, when it comes to making some of those chore lists?
Right. No, that's a great question, Gail. And that is a challenge that we have had in the industry for decades. How we can homogeneize the data and sort of just have as every single farm has similar records. That's one, right? Because even when you think about this large study where we obtain data from many farms, and even the health records, each the categorization that they use, they're different, right? But on top of that, you add the human error, as you said, and it's just making sure that information is accurate. And yeah, that's a challenge that is hard to overcome, right? I think that our focus is to find really, I think that this data that is less, they're more strict. Because that data can get you, for instance, and this is just one example, not that we're going to be using it for assessing inflammation, but for instance, medication withdrawal time, right? That they have to be sure that or it's more strict, right? So there is a more scrutiny on that data. So there are some records that they're related to more economical decisions that also they're more scrutiny, like the somatic cell count, the milk production, all those data. So the goal is to identify, if those records that have a higher accuracy, if you might say, they're associated with high inflammation, right? And if we can identify cutoff to select population of high risk for inflammation and population that is good, that they don't need treatment. And with that being said, the body condition score, I agree 100%. Since I have been working with extension, this probably back when I was with Gustavo in Ohio State University, I have been trying to train and to educate producers and employees to record body condition score, but it still is such a uncommon practice. Although there's so much data, so much knowledge now that they have shown the importance of monitoring body condition score and body condition score loss during the transition period. But one thing, the positive thing in the horizon, is that these cameras that actually do this automatically, they're becoming fairly accurate. And I'm seeing more and more farms, proactive farms, actually utilizing, purchasing and utilizing this technology. So I think that in the near future we'll have a little more accurate data, or at least on those parameters. And then the other ones, and this is just a few ones that we haven't identified, but when it comes to the parity of the animal, that is usually really accurate, right? Parity, dystocia event or stillborn event, because those are the ones we're looking at. Calving disorders, those are usually fairly accurate. But as I mentioned before, the idea is just to identify those more scrutiny records, or the more accurate, it's not accurate, but more reliable record that, and then see if there's association in those lines. But yeah, that I agree 100%. It's a challenge. It's going to be there, and well-managed and proactive farms will be able to implement these approaches. Other farms, it might not work just because of the data quality is not there. The data accuracy is not there.
I want to ask you too about body condition score, because we know that those high condition cows are going to be problematic. That's kind of been, that's a lot older than this inflammation work is even, but there's so much confounding factors that go into body condition score, right? Like the cows that are overconditioned for a reason. So, they might be lower producing in the previous lactation, or have a longer dry period, or, there's a number of reasons why they may have gotten where they gotten. So what do you think? And I know we're still kind of teasing out the mechanisms of this to some extent, but in your mind, what do you think it is about high body condition score cows that causes them to be these problem cows, and high inflammatory cows when they calf back in?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg on the mechanism, as you say, and especially what are the previous conditions that actually might have caused that, and if those have any effect on the high inflammatory status that we are seeing in the transition period. I think there's good data now showing the association between the fat mobilization and inflammation, right? Those pro-inflammatory molecules that are stimulated or secreted when we have these fat mobilization metabolites, right? So I think that we know we are understanding much better the mechanisms of association, fat mobilization, inflammation, how those can cause each other, right? But then if any of the previous event that actually got that animal to be overconditioned can affect the inflammation as well, right? One thing that we're seeing even with these approaches with the anti-inflammatory management, we're doing one or two treatments. Now the people are doing only one treatment, 1 day, one dose. And we're seeing effect on the animals up to 150 days in milk. So, that is like that salicylate or acetylsalicylic acid, that's well gone, right? It's disappeared like long time ago. So why the animals still have effects, right? So that is what at the beginning got scratching our heads, say, it's doing something at the molecular level, right? It's doing something at the cellular level that is allowing those animals to be more developed or better suited to have a better performance, right? These colleagues in the field, but I just want to point out Dr. Ribeiro Eduardo research about the disease and how a cow that has a disease in this lactation, their heifers will be negatively impairing their so that association, that long-term association, is where as you were saying, like these factors that are causing the cow to be overconditioned most likely are related in some degree to the inflammation we're seeing, right? And which is the one that has the heavier, the bigger impact, or the bigger effect on that, right? Is that the cow didn't get pregnant and therefore has a longer lactation and therefore got overconditioned, or is the cow had a longer gestation length, right? So what is that factor that caused the overconditioned score that could be also associated with high inflammation, right? So unfortunately, it's not a straight cut answer, right? A simple is this. So it's like what we have been always. It's not dealing the word I'm looking, but we always have been finding out that it's a multifactorial cascade in events, and there are so many correlations, and that I think that for the applicability or applied point of view, we just gotta find where are the bigger players that could be easily identified in the field through common practices such as farm records, and then develop an applied strategy that could be utilized to address the high risk for inflammation that these population may have.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, so when I did the studies that Barry and I did, we didn't see an immediate effect of salicylate or meloxicam. We saw a delayed effect. And it was after most transition cow trials would have called it quits, right? Like, so you do a transition cow trial, you have some sort of intervention, either pre-fresh, post-fresh, then you monitor cows for, 30, 60 days, something like that. And you either say, yes, there was an effect, or no, there wasn't. And there's very few studies that have gone and done the whole lactation thing and done the long-term thing. And you talked about some of Eduardo's research where he's looking at intergenerational. And I know down at Jeff Dahl down in Florida has done a lot of that as well with the heat stress. And it, a lot of times we say, results varied, right? This study found this and this study found this. But sometimes I wonder if we just didn't monitor them for long enough, right? Like, and how much have we missed out on because, for budget reasons or whatever reasons we don't get to monitor cows until the end of their lactation most of the time. And it's really fascinating to me to think about some of the long-term effects. And I think, and the other thing too is to convince producers that something works, right? Because you expect, hey, I started this new treatment or I started this new intervention, and now I'm going to see 3 pounds of milk or whatever, 5 pounds of milk. But it's not going to, a lot of these things isn't going to be an immediate return, right? And so convincing people to stick with something because of the long-term impacts can be challenging in and of itself. So. Right.
And on those lines, is so dependable, or as you say, like resources, funding, and so on. This is so much is coming up to light now that even in the past, I always put the example of the veterinary medicine field. When I went to vet school, and by the time I graduated, we were trained to diagnose and treat the disease mostly. Right, there was still some prevention components, of course, but most of our work was diagnosing and treating. Now we know that, especially in the cattle dairy industry field, now we know that if the animal got sick, we're already too late. Because even if we treat the animal, that animal already is going to have an impaired performance, right? So now it's now more than ever that we're understanding more and more of the pathophysiology of these conditions is that when we really have to focus our management on prevention, and everything is really tailoring toward decreasing stress, decreasing inflammation, and improving that, as you say, I agree. Back in 2015, I finished in 2017 my PhD. We still were in the highly monitoring approach when it comes to management of especially the fresh cow, right? We'll be recommending to log all the animals once a day, after the morning milking, and do
pull blood on everybody. Yep.
Right, exactly. Metritis diagnosis, and now we know that we are adding an extra layer of stress, and I'm not aware of any study that look into more of those stress or inflammation based on restraining. Because there are several studies that have looked at the timing of having the animals restrained associated with laying time or intake time or stuff like that. But I don't know if there's a study that actually look into an animal that is get restrained, even long-term, stress, for instance, measuring chronic stress, right? An animal that get locked every day for the first, 3 weeks after calving, compared to an animal did not. Those animals have more or less stress, and that has an effect on fertility. Just to give an example, in these aspirin trials that we published back in 2020, we found an association. Well, not an association, yeah. So the animals that become ill in the first 60 days in milk, they have a much higher cortisol concentration 24 and 36 hours after calving. And, 24 and 36 hours after calving, those animals are healthy. There's nothing wrong with those animals. But the cortisol levels were way higher compared to the animals that remained healthy, right? So, if you get a higher cortisol response on the animals that you're restraining, more likely those animals are going to be in a higher risk to become ill, right? And linking to that now is why we are starting to rely more and more in technology, right? So these activity monitors that now are getting more and more accurate, assessing rumination and number of steps, time laying down, and so on, that could be utilized as not as a solely diagnostic tool, but at least as a flagging tool. They say, okay, this animal is a little off. Let's take a look at it. Instead of locking all the animals, right, and doing all subjecting all those animals to that restraining stress or handling stress, unnecessary in most of the cases, right?
Can we talk for a minute? Because I love how you said that by the time an animal is sick, we're too late. So when we're thinking about the transition period and inflammation and management or modulation of inflammation, what are some of the steps we should be taking? Treatments aside, anti-inflammatories aside, what are some of the practical take-home messages that we can be sending to producers about making sure that they are modulating inflammation in their transition cows?
That's a great question, Gil. And we actually were starting a study a couple of years ago that we ran out of funds, and we just were waiting to get more funds to keep going. But where we were looking into different prepartum management practices that could be associated with high inflammation across farms. And Dr. Overton's lab actually got ahead of us, and they published a really nice two papers last year, I believe, where they actually look into that. And it's really it's a great study. I actually using it for many presentations now. But they actually found associations, high inflammation on association or on practices that we actually already were not recommending, right? High stocking density, commingling first lactations with heifers with multiple cows in the prepartum. All those common management practices that we have been training employees and educating producers about, that most of them remain true when it comes to inflammation as well. Stocking density, especially when it comes to feed bank availability, at the feed bank, ensuring those 30 inches per animal, trying to not commingle heifers with multiples, or at least have a lower stocking density when we commingle those animals. there's not much research on this, but there's definitely a strong association with personal management and training, right? And personnel that roughly manage the animals, that's going to add stress and pain in some cases to the animals, right? Well-trained animals when it comes to assisting dystoxic calves, right? So another study that is sort of in the back burner that one day I would like to do is a personnel that is well trained assists a cow, and a personnel that is not trained assists a cow. Does that cow has high inflammation compared to the cow that was assisted by a well trained personnel or farm worker?
Fascinating.
So I'm sure there is a strong associations there, and something is like when we think about anything that could stress the animal when it comes to diet availability, water availability, space availability, right? All those factors are key to keep the low inflammation in this group of animals. And as you say, anti-inflammatory treatment aside, right? Just like management-wise, nutrition, nutrition, the basic of nutrition, but I always say more important than the actual diet composition, which is important, is the diet availability. Sometimes I go to farms and we do a lot of this extension consulting work. I go to farms and they had their nutritionist working the diet and say, we look at everything, it looks perfect. And I look at it and say, it looks amazing, maybe a little thing here and there. But then I go there and they have 120% stocking density. And they have, multiple scale with heifer, and the heifers are the one that become sick and they're not getting pregnant, yada, yada, yada. And say, guys, so here the diet composition is not the issue. The animals just don't have the access to the diet, right? So some basic stuff like that sometimes can go a long way when it comes to inflammation and overall performance of the animal as well.
I really agree with everything you just said, especially when it comes to stocking density. I think that's something that gets overlooked so often especially with dry cows and pre-fresh cows, is stocking density in the pack or the freestall, but also at the feed bunk too. And I really appreciate your comments about making sure that feed's available and accessible, and being pushed up and all this other stuff, because it seems like on a lot of farms, the dry cows are kind of, we're really focusing on pushing up feed in the lactating barn, but the dry cow barn's out there. So we might, be pushing up feed every hour, every 2 hours in the lactating barn, and dry cows, it's, a couple times a day. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity on a lot of farms is, like you said, the stocking density and feed availability. And a lot of times too, I know we have in Iowa, we have a lot of farms that are planning on putting in upgrading their transition cow facilities, and understand that transition cow facilities are a very important part of good transition cow management. But when you look at, money's tight, right? And you can build a new freestall barn, or you can build a new calf barn, or you can't build anything. A lot of times the dry cow facilities kind of make their way down relative to some of the other priorities that we have. So really appreciate those comments. The other thing I'd add to your list, and I guess as a veterinarian, I'm curious about your perspective too, but you talked about, pulling calves and dystocia and how big of an impact that can have. So, a lot of times in the nutrition world, it seems like we really focus on the pre-fresh diet and the post-fresh diet and making sure those are right, and even our, pre-fresh and post-fresh management. But there's this entire huge event that happens in the middle of the transition period that a lot of times we kind of scoot over. So when it comes to maternity management, what are some of the best practices that you see for managing maternity, and what are good farms doing right with maternity?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I agree, Gail, that it's quite often forgotten. But I mean, the best management practices is the monitoring. I think that is a key component, and also training the personnel to know what to look for. As one of the benchmarks that we have when it comes to maternity management is to monitor the close-up pen at least once an hour, right? Walk those pens and look for those imminent signs of parturition, and train the personnel to know what to look for, right? When we're looking at some discharge through the vulva, swelling of the vulva, leakage of colostrum, and all those early factors that will let the employee know that the animal is getting close to calving. And once the animal gets started in the stage 2, which is the labor, is monitoring that time in labor, right? Because that is going to tell the employee when they need to assess the animal, because we don't want to go too soon, because that could cause excessive and unnecessary trauma on that birth canal. But we don't want to go too late, because that's going to cause, it could cause the death of that calf as well. When we do this training, we do a lot of these trainings with the personnel related to, proper best management practices for the maternity operation. Is a matter of monitoring that, and basically what they want to look for is that every 15 to 20 minutes, you want to see some sort of progress on that parturition process. And then, after 70 minutes, if there is no progress, they need to inspect that animal. They need to put in the head shell. They need to properly clean that the perineal area, and then put on their PPE, the protective personal equipment, and then inspect that animal, do a vaginal palpation, and see what is going on there. But I think that the key piece, if I have to put to select one key piece practice, is monitoring, right? It's the frequency of monitoring and also knowing what to look for. And then when we need, we know what to look for and when to assess or check that animal, assess that animal. That is also key for the time component, timely assistance. Not too late, not too early, not too late. Just the right time.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. We've been talking for almost 40 minutes, and you shared, before the beginning, you shared your 3 to 5 areas of expertise, and we've only hit about one of them. So we ask all of our guests to share 3 to 5 areas of expertise. You listed transition cow management, which we've spent a lot of time talking about, but also reproductive performance and cow health. And I think cow health is something that's probably tied in the whole time. So maybe we've hit 2 of these, but before we kind of start wrapping up, what are you looking at with reproductive performance? What do you think is the bottleneck on a lot of herds? What's kind of the new frontier when it comes to reproductive management?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what I have learned through the years is that one of the most common issues that they are on reproductive management is they're very basic. They don't go back to the actual protocol or changing the protocol and starting these highly advanced protocols that in research field on the research world they work really good. But when you bring it to the real life scenario, there are going to be, some factors that must be in place in order to actually make it work, right? So one thing that I quite often see is that they get too complicated when they can have the same result with a much more simplistic approach, but well managed. I think that sometimes I see producers that just because they want to go the extra mile, that's great. And I really enjoy interacting with producers with that personality of that approach. But sometimes, that extra mile can get you to overcommit or overseeing some of the details on those complex protocols. So, they can have the same result, especially when you look at the overall farm features when it comes to labor availability, personal training. That's a huge one. And then, structure or infrastructure like facilities, right? When you think about these protocols, some of them, they're like 9 shots, right? And then you have to find those animals like 1 or twice a week to give the shots. And you have to restrain those animals and the whole thing, right? And think about that. You get one of those shots wrong, and that animal is not going to be set for, it's not going to be ovulating when you want it, right? So 1 out of 9 that you miss, and that the whole thing falls down, right? So I think that is one thing, at least in the field experience, that I have seen, that sometimes I think that keep it, the simpler you can keep it for your management, for your farm, where your resources that you have, labor, infrastructure, time commitment, the better. The simpler you can have it, the better. And the result is they're really good as well. It's not that, they're not that much different between much more complex, 5%, or, usually there's not much different than 5-7% between one protocol and another. So, sometimes that 5% doesn't worth to go through all this adaptation period that is going to be accompanied or come with some losses for, probably a couple months, or if not, up to 3 or 6 months until they actually get it going, and they actually get it to work. Right? But yeah, I will say that. And the one thing that I have seen a lot, and perhaps it's because of my area of expertise, is that a lot of the reproductive performance issues that I have seen or I help producers with, they're related to transition cow management issues. We quite often I had the call about, I'm struggling with conception rate at first service, or my first and second lactation cows, first service and second service are low. I cannot get those higher. And, a really typical scenario of poor transition management and just addressing those components. We have actually, many farms that we have helped, and the biggest challenge that we have sometimes that's addressing some of those issues, as you say, like stocking density is a common one. They're costly, right? They're highly expensive. So how can you economically and applicably, or being applied, help the producer to get even better to what they are without investing thousands of dollars? There are ways around. There are ways such as moving animals, a certain group of animals sooner to the milking parlor, the animals that are, high performance animals that are doing really good movement sooner, and keeping the trouble animals a little longer just to have the stocking density lower. Now, there are different, dividing the pen with gates. There are a few things that, that can be implemented that if you get creative, you can get there without spending those, thousands of dollars. But that's the biggest challenge. Addressing some of these sometimes known, because sometimes the producers know that they have overstocking density issues or high stocking density issues. It's just not feasible, right? It's just not feasible, and we have to try to help them through another matter, different ways. But yeah, that's usually, at least in my experience, in my field experience, common issues that I've seen. And when it comes to research, our research is really based on this modulating inflammation. What are the benefits that we can see on reproductive performance? It's not really into the developing new, synchronization protocols or anything on those lines. It's more related to the physiology of inflammation, how that can affect fertility, and how our different treatment approaches could affect reproductive performance.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Anything else before we move into our 3 questions? Anything else that you think we missed in our discussion today? Or
no, I think that we covered most of the current issues or the common concepts on this area. I feel that this is an area that we can have 20 podcasts on it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Sometimes it's hard to concise and summarize the information, but I think that's a good snapshot of what I believe are the most important areas of research needed and also the more applicable knowledge to be utilized by the producers in this area. So
it's time for our famous 3. Maximize profitability and herd health with early detection in animal health, reproduction, calving, and feeding. The most advanced bolus technology and professional support from agricultural experts makes this possible. SmaxTech,
the health system that future-proofs your operation.
Well, thank you. With that, we're going to move into our 3 questions, and I believe you know what's coming. So the first question that we ask all of our guests is, what is your favorite dairy-related book or resource?
It's a great question. I will say one of the main resources that I look for when I want to get up-to-date, unbiased research information is the Journal of Dairy Science. That is one of the main ones I'll go just for that research component. And then the Howard Dairyman magazine will be the other more applied sort of source of information. The other one that if I can put one more out there is the Veterinary of North America sections or the editions. That is another one that I often look, especially when they have the new issues that come out for up-to-date, more veterinary medicine information when it comes to dairy science as well.
All right. So our second question is, what is your favorite non-dairy related book or resource?
That's a good question. Non-dairy related book. I don't know if I have an actual book, but I read a lot about inflammation related to diet in human medicine. Especially when you think about the dairy cow and the ketosis matter related to nutrition. And in human medicine, the nutrition side, there's this boom a couple of years recent interest about the ketogenic diet. And I have been becoming more related to that because my 50-month-old daughter, she's in that diet due to a medical condition, and I myself, just as commitment, I have been in the diet for almost 7 months. But it's really interesting to me to read about that because it's something that on the dairy cow we have been trying to avoid for many, many years, but it not might be that much of the case. And if Lance Bunger will be in this podcast, he will be, right on there saying, I agree with that, right? But I think that there's a lot of information that, either translate or can be utilized as a proof, sort of research concepts for the dairy industry when it comes to nutrition and human medicine, although they're definitely different physiological, mechanism, but it's a lot of concept that they are worth looking into, when it comes to maybe translating to the dairy management.
Interesting. That's a new one that nobody's brought up yet. So congratulations. Yeah. All right. Our last question that we ask all of our guests is, what do you think sets successful dairy professionals apart from those who are not successful?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think there's so many different levels or different type of professionals, right? Because I will say that a proactive and a dairy producer, that will be a dairy professional in my book as well, right? A professor also will be a dairy science professor, will be a profession as well, dairy profession as well. I think that what I have seen, and again, perhaps I'm more in the newie population here, right? I only has been as a faculty for 5 years. But what I have seen in my career that is a little longer than 5 years is that basically is the thinking out of the box and just looking at challenging perhaps the established concepts, right? So those things that we believe that they are the Bible for not finding a better word, that they don't just set for that. Just try to challenge this concept and do that out of the box thinking on new ideas and new. In my case, would be new research, but it could be new management strategies. I always bring this concept along that some of the most meaningful research studies that I have done in my career, they, some of those ideas came out from producers suggesting, hey, why you don't do this, right? And I always listen to the producers that I interact with because they are the ones that are 24/7 with the animals. We, due to our profession, we spend so much time in front of these computers, right? That sometimes we lose that connection with the daily, routine of dairy farming. So I think that those things, and also at least when it comes to dairy farming and farm management, I think that one thing that I have found is just really set them for success. Is just keep it simple. Don't try to get these complex strategies or just get into the nitty-gritty of some things. And sometimes the simple management with attention to details, simple and attention to details, get farther than implementing these highly complex new technologies or strategies. So I think I'm going to stop there because I can go on and on, but I think those would be some of the main things that I have seen in my short career that set people apart when it comes to success.
I'd agree with all of that. I think that's very well said. All right, Adrian, before I let you go, is there anywhere that anybody can find more information about you and what you're working on and stay up to date with what you got? We've already established it's not LinkedIn. So where can folks go if they want to stay in touch with what you're doing?
Yeah, you stole that last phrase from my mouth. I was just going to say that. No LinkedIn. So the College of Agricultural Science at Penn State College of Agricultural Sciences webpage and the Veterinary and Biomedical Science Department, that is where my information, my more up-to-date information will be at. So my email, my contact information, my latest research. The other thing, everybody can reach out to me through email. That is usually the best approach, and is axb779 at PSU from Penn State University .edu. So always happy to interact with producers or colleagues about any research or dairy management topics. So encourage everybody to reach out. I'm happy to help with anything. So.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this afternoon or this morning or whenever people are listening to this, and appreciate you taking the time. It was a really great discussion today.
Thank you, Gail, and the podcast for the invitation. That was a great program. Thanks.